Hey there, my fellow music lovers. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for dropping by and for checking this video out. I thought I would do a review of Metallica's opening night show in Wisconsin as part of their Worldwired Tour that just got kicked off on September the 2nd. Metallica is still supporting their latest album, Hardwired To Self-Destruct, which came out, I believe it's been about a couple of years now. It's been out a little bit, but they've been touring all around the world, and they're just kicked off a U.S. leg, and thought I would run through the set list, talk about what you could expect. Maybe you're going to go check them out. I would like to know if you're going to go see them. Be sure to drop that in the comments below. Yeah, so they're playing a lot of new stuff from what I can tell looking over the set list. If you're a fan of the newer stuff, then you will like this show. I know for myself, I saw Metallica actually many years ago. I saw them on the Injustice for All tour back in the late 80s. And that was, I guess, right towards the end of what a lot of people refer to as their classic period, when they still had the long hair and they were putting out this progressive speed metal type stuff. And, before everything kind of got streamlined and more radio FM friendly with the Black Album that would come in the early part of the 90s. And I remember that tour, Injustice tour. That was the first one with Jason Newsted on bass. And it was pretty amazing. That was a real rockin' show. And of course, I'm a fan from that era. I grew up with the Cliff Burton years and, Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning and Kill 'Em All and all that. So I'm very much partial to that era. I really do like that stuff more than anything else that they've ever done. Not really my favorite tour in terms of the set lists. I'm, kind of hoping that they do a retro tour of some kind. I was thinking maybe they would do it on this tour. Being that it's been 30 years since And Justice for All came out, and they're going to be putting out a deluxe reissue in November, which I'll get to in a little bit. But I remember when that album came out. I can't believe it's been 30 years. I was in college when that album came out, And Justice for All. And, at that time, a lot of my friends, they were into the hair metal stuff, and here I come walking in with And Justice for All, blackened and that kind of stuff. And people thought I was crazy, the speed metal stuff. Of course, they think I'm crazy, but yet they're listening to music from these guys walking around dressed like chicks, So, I don't, with the hair teased up and makeup, but I'm the one, like Metallica was singing about injustice and corruption and greed, stuff that still is a hot topic and is more relevant now probably than it was back in 87 or 88. I guess it was 88 when it first came out. And yet it's funny how things change. And then a few years later, Metallica is the biggest band in the world and everybody loves them. And if you don't love Metallica, well, then what's wrong with you? So it's funny how that kind of stuff changes. But anyway, getting to the show, they don't have an opening act, but they have a stand-up comedian who goes out before the show. His name is Jim Brewer, and he does, some stand-up comedy, tries to get the crowd loose, shoots some, T-shirts into the audience and that kind of stuff. Jim used to be on Saturday Night Live. He used to be the goat boy, you may recall. He was like the half man, half goat. And Jim's a really cool guy. I got to meet him a couple of times. I usually see him once a year. Just a little bit of backstory on that. He is a fan of the New York Mets, the baseball team, and he does the fantasy camp, which is in Florida every January. And my brother does it too. So I usually go with him just to get the hell out and get to the sun. It's 70-degree weather in January. Yeah, I'm there. I don't care what fantasy you're off in. I'm going to go to Florida and enjoy the Rays. You know what I mean? So anyway, I've met Jim a couple times. He's a really cool guy, and he's really funny. And I'll even throw up a photo. I had taken a photo with him. It was back in 2016, I believe. You'll notice that my goatee is not there, but I will tell you this, that's when I first started growing it. So you're seeing like the first week or two of this actually in that photo. But anyway, yeah, Jim's a cool guy, and he's actually got a camera crew with him and he's filming his experience of the Metallica tour. It's called Life on Tour, and if you go to his Facebook page, you can see he just put up like a 15-minute video behind the scenes. It was really cool because he documents what it was like going out for the first show, which was, you know, a bit of a test to see how, you know, because it was kind of an unproven thing as to what it was going to be like having a stand-up comic go out before a Metallica show. And so, you know, it pretty much gives you the good and the bad and the ugly of how everything went down. And some really cool stuff too. He gets this kid from the audience, brings him backstage. He gets to play drums with the band. They're like rehearsing before the show, just kind of like loosening up, and they're really cool to this kid, and the kid is just like, you know, he's shaking, he's so excited. You might want to check that out. I'll put a link to it down below. But yeah, Jim is a really good guy, and I recommend you checking out his stuff. So anyway, let's get into the show itself, all right? This is the tour opener from Madison, Wisconsin on September the 2nd. They kick things off with Hardwired, which was the first song that we got to hear from this new album. And when I first heard this song, I thought, wow, this sounds like some really good stuff. I really do like that song. Actually, it kind of reminds me of the stuff that they were coming out with back in the Master of Puppet days. It sounds like a song that you would have heard like either the first song or the last song on one of their albums. Just, you know, kind of a real quick thrashing song. And unfortunately, though, the rest of the album wasn't quite like that. The rest of the album, to me, sounded more like the Reload, Load kind of era. I don't know. I'm not really, it's not like the new album is bad, because I don't think it's a bad album. There's just something about it that doesn't connect with me like the older stuff does. I'm not really quite sure what it is, but they go into another new one, Atlas Rise. Again, not a bad song. It's got some pretty good stuff going on, but it just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't grab me like, let's say, Seek and Destroy, which is up next. That's a great one from the Kill 'Em All album. And then they do a track called Cyanide, which is from the Death Magnetic album. They hadn't played this song since 2015. And they haven't played it since the opener either. They've already played a handful of shows. And this is the only one that it has appeared at. Who knows if they'll whip it out again. I remember that album, Death Magnetic, was kind of a throwback to the Master of Puppet style of, I guess, writing and arranging songs. And I thought it had some pretty good stuff on it. Certainly, I've enjoyed that album more than a lot of other things that they've done over the past 20 years. Then they do Fade to Black, which is from Ride the Lightning. That's a great classic one. Then they do a couple of new ones, Now That We're Dead and Confusion. And then they come back with For Whom the Bell Tolls. I mean, that's a classic from Master of Puppets there. Love that song. And then they come back with another new one, Halo on Fire. And then this is a point in the show after this where Kirk and Rob kind of do a little solo thing. And usually they play a song that is tied into the city that they're in. And so they, for this show, they chose a song called Stupid Girl, which was done by a band called Garbage. You may recall them from the 90s. And so they did that song just as a duo. And they've been doing this for many, many shows, even when they were going like around the world. When they went to Norway, they did Take On Me by Aha. You may recall that song from the 80s. And that was a bit, I don't know. It started off kind of cool. I'll put a link to it. It starts off cool, but then Rob starts to sing, and I don't think he should have done that. I don't know. If you had told me back in the 80s, when Take On Me came out, that Metallica, like the Master of Puppets band that I was listening to at that time, was going to one day kind of, you know, cover this song in some way, I would have thought you were crazy. Like, why would Metallica? What happens in 2018 that Metallica is covering Aha? Like, but they did, and I did a whole video. I'll put a link up to it about some of the uncool things that Metallica has done. And when I say uncool, what I'm trying to say is that things that a speed metal band aren't normally known for doing, you know, stuff that you would never catch Slayer doing, that Metallica just does, because Metallica, they do whatever the hell they want to do. They're a very unorthodox band. If they want to cover a Bob Seger song, they'll do it. You know, if they want to cover an Aha song, they'll do it. They want to make a movie, fine. You know, plenty of other things that Metallica's done throughout the years that have just been, you know, you want to get up and sing with Lady Gaga, do it. Make an album with Lou Reed, do it. You know, like, where do I stop here? So anyway, after that, they do Last Caress, which was a great track. It's a Misfits song, and it first appeared on their Garage Days album, which came out in between Master of Puppets and Injustice for All. You know, after the Master of Puppets album, they lost their bassist, Cliff Burton. He died, and so the band was reeling, and they just wanted to keep on moving forward, and they put out this quick album of covers before they got into their Injustice for All album. And so they got this brand new bass player named Jason Newsted, and the Garage Days Revisited album is an awesome album. Every track on there is killer. Great, great covers. And Last Caress, I remember, you know, just loving that one. And you could hear Jason on that album. That's what I like about that album too, is the new bass player, I thought, was really, really good. And then when Injustice came out, it was like, where the hell is he? And I'll get to that in just a little bit. Anyway, after this, they do Fuel from, I think it was Load. I think that's the album it comes off of, or one of those albums from in there. Definitely one of their 90s FM-friendly songs. I actually thought that was a cool song. Very short and sweet, powerful punch. I like that one. Then they do Moth into Flame, which is a brand new song. That's the one that they did with Lady Gaga at an award show, I think. They got a lot of shit for that. Then they do Sad But True, which is from the Black album, of course. That's a cool song. Then they do One from Injustice for All. This is the only song from that album that they're doing in this show. They have done Harvester of Sorrow. I've seen that song appear in a set list from one of the more recent shows. But yeah, Injustice for All, like I said earlier, 30 years that it has been out, and they're putting out a definitive reissue of this album on November the 2nd. It's going to come out like in all formats. It's going to have all kinds of bonus stuff. I mean, I saw one track list for one of the definitive versions that is just like mind-blowing, the stuff that's in there. It's like there's so much stuff in here. It's like, I think one of the versions, like if you give your right testicle, you'll probably get the keys to Lars's car. I mean, there's so much stuff in it. One of them had like a camcorder shot, like a fan-filmed show or something from that tour. I mean, and there's a bunch of them. It's just so much stuff. But you know what's missing? What's still missing is Jason Newsted's bass. Where is that? Like, if I'm going to pay $1,000 to hear this album again, give me Jason Newsted's bass tracks. You know, you don't even have to mix them into the album. Just give them to me on a CD so I can, you know, make my own album. Someone actually did that. A fan, I'll put a link to it. A number of years ago, they got into their, I don't know, got into their Pro Tools or something and was able to rescue Jason Newsted's bass from that album. And he made this recording called And Jason for All, I think it was called, because when Jason Newsted joined Metallica, they intentionally mixed his bass down so low that you can't even hear it practically, and the album is just very, very dry. And it's always been something that's irritated Jason. Even to this day, it bothers him. And the band, you know, there's been lots of rumors as to why that happened. Some have said that it was done out of spite because they were still kind of hurt from losing Cliff Burton, their former bass player, and they were kind of hazing Jason, but that's really not been the case. It was really more of a matter of Jason's, the sound and I guess the frequency that Jason played in was right in the same pocket where James Hetfield's guitar was, and they wanted to bring up Hetfield's guitar, and in order to do that they had to push down Jason's bass playing, and they just, you know, between Lars and James, they just kept pushing down Jason's bass to a point where you could barely hear it, and so, You know, right in that same pocket, though, you can hear the bass drum. You can hear James Hetfield's guitar. You know, everything that those two guys are doing. It was really all about them at that point. It was always the Lars and James show. And unfortunately, Jason Newsted lost out on that album. And they don't even want to put his bass tracks. They don't even want to mix them in some kind of an alternate version on this reissue. So if you're not going to get it on this reissue, you're probably never going to get it. So anyway, after that, they do Master of Puppets. Oh, and by the way, the song One is amazing. I remember when that first came out, it was just so... And then the video that came out with it too, you know, about the guy. It was... I think it was Billy Get Your Gun or something, about this guy who he was like a soldier who, you know, he was missing his arms and legs, and he was basically just sitting in a hospital bed. He could hear everything going on around him, but, you know, he couldn't speak, and how torturous it was. I mean, the video was just like jarring. It was just, you know, just amazing. And the music of that song, it was very, very riveting and powerful. I think One is one of the best tracks, and so glad to see that in there. Of course, you got to have that. And I remember when I went to go see them back in 88 or 89, whenever it was, all the lighters were out. Everybody had their lighters up, and I thought that was pretty interesting, because usually you didn't see lighters at a Metallica concert. Usually you see that at like a Poison concert or something, but just goes to show you they were starting to enter the mainstream. It was like they kind of broke into the mainstream a little bit with that album. And then of course it was the Black Album that really, really blew them out. Then they finished the show with Master of Puppets. That's how they finish that whole first set. And then they come back for the encore with Spit Out the Bone, Nothing Else Matters, and Enter Sandman. So there you go, folks. There's a set list. What do you think? Are you going to go see this show? Would you go see this show? This is one of those things where if the opportunity came up, if it wasn't that much of a journey to go see them, I would go see the show just to go see it. Just to experience it. I wouldn't go out of my way a whole lot. I would go out of my way if it was more of a retro show and they were doing more of the classic stuff. If they did like an Injustice for All tour or something, I'd definitely go see that. There's no question. But, you know, this show is definitely more geared towards the newer stuff. So if that's your thing, then you will love this show for sure. They are mixing some songs in and out. I noticed, like in place of Last Caress, they'll do Bread Fan. In place of Fuel, they may throw in like The Memory Remains. Or maybe they'll throw in Hit the Lights. What else have they done? No Leaf Clover, Creeping Death, Harvester of Sorrow. These kinds of songs are kind of circling in and out. So depending on where you catch them, you may see one of these songs. But anyway, put your comments below. I'm going to have some links for you down there too. Let me know what you think of this set list. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Hit the subscribe button. Thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you next time.